This is Basic, the Atari 8-bit podcast.
That's all I wanted to do. And I skipped going on vacation with my parents because I wouldn't be able to dial into these bulletin boards and see what was going on and leave messages to my friends. It just got like a drug. Sometimes I say, Jesus, that ate up a lot of my life. What the hell was I thinking? But they were such fun times.
This is an interview episode of Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. Bob C. was an Atari software pirate in New York who went by the moniker The Missing Link. This interview took place on January 19th, 2016. All right, so before you and I get started, I don't know your last name.
Just put me down as Bob C.
Bob C., all right. And what was your pirate moniker back in the day?
I had a couple of them, but most people will know me as The Missing Link.
Great. What was it? Do you have any others you want to share? I mean, we might as well just get it all out there. And
I mean, back in the day when I was 12 years old, I started flip-flopping a lot of names.
Mm-hmm.
I had like the Ranger, then I was the Cutlass, and then, through the tail end of the 8-bit days and all the way through the ST days, I was the Missing Link. So.
Cool. Did you crack as well, or mainly just pirate?
I did a little bit of basic cracking, but I wasn't quick enough. Too many people were really quick at releasing and cracking games, so I was mainly a pirate and a spreader and a trader, stuff like that to spread the pirated software that a lot of my friends cracked, both in the U.S. and on the bulletin boards, worldwide.
Okay, great. Well, let's start your story. I want to go before the beginning, before you're 12 years old. When you first got into computers, kind of set the stage for me.
And if I'm talking too much, just cut me off, because this was like many years and took up like every day of my life when I really got into this stuff. So. Well, back when I was in 7th grade, I think I was like 12 years old, 11 or 12, my father kept saying, these computers are out. Radio Shack has these TRS-80s and Atari and Commodore 64. We should really get one in the house. And, this is going to be the future. And I was like, yeah. I'm a hockey player. I don't have to be sitting on a computer playing video games. But, so one day my dad brought home this Atari 800, and I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. And I didn't really know anybody else with one. So I just kind of sat down and I was buying magazines at the store and, typing games in that took like 2 to 3 nights just to type these games in BASIC and in different languages. And I didn't have any storage devices because, a tape drive for the Atari 800 back in the day was $400. We're talking the early 80s, like 1981. And, I'm 11 years old. My parents didn't have the money to buy it for me. They said, here's the computer. If you want any other accessories, go get a job, go deliver papers or penny savers and get the stuff you need. So I would stay up all night when I got home from school and typing in these games, and it'd be basic crap like Pong or these real basic games. I'm like, okay, you play it and you turn your computer off and it's gone.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
You have to type in another game. So I'm like, okay, now I'm like, I can't even save this stuff. So now I'm money hungry at 11 years old. So I get a paper route and a penny saver route, and I'm saving all my money. And, and then I'm like, it took me about 8 months to a year to sit, probably a year. And all the holidays from my grandparents, my parents, all I asked for was money because I wanted to get a tape drive and a 300 baud acoustic modem. So everybody gave me money, all the holidays and all my relatives and whatever. So, I finally had enough money to buy a tape drive, and I got a $300 baud acoustic modem. And I'm like, what am I going to do with this modem? Okay, there's some public domain, bulletin boards out there and whatnot. But now I was able to, now I had this tape drive, I was able to, I think it was an 810 tape drive. I forget all the models. I don't have the equipment anymore. But
if it was a tape drive, it was probably the 410.
Yeah, the 410, the 410. Yeah. And then I think it upgraded to the 810 later, I think. But what was the 810, the disk drive? Maybe the
810 was the disk drive, and the later cassette drive was the 1010.
That's right. So now I'm typing in these games and I could save them. And I was like, okay, that's kind of cool, and that take like 10 minutes to load the damn game that I'm typing out of a magazine I'm buying at the store. Meanwhile, I'm looking at these other games on the shelf at stores that cost like $40-50 that came out on tape. And I was like, wow, these are the real games. Like, this isn't some crap I'm typing in out of a magazine. So I'm like, I got to find a way to get these games. And then I also saw that even better games were coming out on 5 1/4 inch floppy. So I'm like, oh, I can't afford those. I don't have a floppy drive. And so I started selling the games I was typing in the magazines. I found a couple of kids at school that had these Atari computers. So I started to hustle these games, and I would really rave about them, even though they really suck. And I would sell tapes of these games to these kids so that they wouldn't have to type them in themselves. And they didn't have any connection to any pirates or bulletin boards or anything. So I was making money at junior high selling these games, all these magazines. So I was staying up even longer just to make money so that I could get a floppy drive. So once I got a floppy drive, I was like, okay, now I've graduated. I can get all these other cool games, and I'm saving all this money just to buy a game for $40. I'm like, wait a minute, there's like 200 games out there, and I could afford one or two. Got to be a way around this. So one of my best friends in my neighborhood, he's 3 years older than me, said, hey, a really good friend of mine at school has one of those computers that you have. I go, really? He goes, yeah, I think he's really into it. And he goes, let me introduce you to him. He lives about a mile from our house. We'll ride our bikes over there. So that was the day I was introduced, living in my own town, to one of Atari's 8-bit's biggest crackers and legends, Kilroy. And I go in this guy's house, in his bedroom, and there's just racks and racks and racks and racks of floppy disks. And I was like, holy smokes, this is the holy grail.
Yeah.
And I was like, where do you get all these? And I didn't understand cracking at the time. And he started putting in plain terms saying, oh, I obtain them. I have a lot of contacts, this, and this. And he said, he goes, oh, you're friends with Sam? I said, yeah. He goes, well, here's some games for you. Let me know what you think of them. So I hurry up, roll my bike home, load up these games. And all of a sudden I start loading them up. And instead of seeing the copyrighted screen, I'm seeing these screens that say, cracked by Kilroy, member of NATO, North American Traders Organization. I was like, what's this? And then I called my buddy and I said, what's all this cracking? And so we really, I got an education on computer piracy and how copy protection is removed from the games. And then I really started getting intrigued and I started buying games off Kilroy. I'm like, look, I want your games that you're cracking. I could sell them at school and we could make some money. In the meantime, I started becoming really good friends with him. And he showed me a couple things about breaking into the games and cracking. And he was also making his own mods for the Atari 8-bit, like accelerators that would load up, that would load the floppy disk quicker, and these ramrod chips that you put in your PC, and it would increase the memory on them. And I was just really, really like enamored by everything going on in this guy's house. So on his screens, they would always have these shout outs, and they would always put bulletin boards and their phone numbers of like cracked by Kilroy, member of NATO, other NATO bulletin boards to call, and they would list them. And I'm like, wait a minute, now these phone numbers are in my area. If I dial long distance back in the early 80s, it was like, 80 cents a minute.
Sure.
And I'm like, I'm dialing around my town. I'm hitting all these like bulletin board systems that were all public domain. I found a couple pirate ones, but you need to know the guy to get access. So then I was like, I need a way to call long distance. And the more I talked to Kilroy, I started reaching out to some of his friends that I started to get to know, and this whole world of hacking phone codes came into play. So at a young age, I wrote with a couple other guys a phone hacking program where basically you would dial up. Back in the day, there was phone cards so that you could call long distance. You got better rates than picking up your handset in your kitchen and just dialing a long distance number. You could subscribe like Metro Media. A couple guys are probably laughing hearing that name, or MCI back in the day, and a few other smaller phone companies. You would subscribe to a phone card and have a code on it. So we would write these programs that would take your modem, and it would dial the carrier all night and you would plug in, have it call a long distance phone number, then randomly put in numbers for phone codes, which would give you someone's calling card number so that you could call long distance for free. So I'm like, I didn't do a lot of the coding. A couple of my friends did on the first program we wrote. So the first night I'm in bed and I had this Atari dot matrix. I had a Panasonic 1080 dot matrix printer, which I bought from selling computer games once I got exposed to some of these guys in NATO. And I think the other group was NATO and NAPA, North American Pirates Organization. So then I got this dot matrix printer, and I start, not even thinking about that this was illegal or anything. I was a kid. I just needed access to get these games. I mean, I just had this like craving and thirst to get on these. Like I thought it was like dialing into a movie star's home, or an athlete, because I was a big athlete. I'm like, holy cow, I gotta get on this bulletin board. This is like the top of the peak. So, and I remember the first time I hacked the phone code, I was sleeping, and also my Panasonic 1080 printer started going nuts printing something in the middle of the night. And I hurry up, wake up, and there's some phone codes, because back in the day, they were only, I think, like 5 digits long, so it wasn't too hard to crack phone cards for years.
It's just ridiculous. So 5-digit.
So I would pop up, and I'm like, I gotta get on this bulletin board. I'm like, okay, it's 1:30 in the morning. I have school at 7. I gotta get up. Well, this gives me time to dial in. So I would dial into these bulletin boards, and I'm like, nobody would give you access. They give you like this very minimum access, and you could poke around, but you can't see any games. You could post on. Back in the day, there were message boards. You could leave messages to each other, and that's how you communicated. There was no email or anything. So everything was in the public. And I'm like, I'm new to this scene. No one's going to give me access. So I started, I talked to Kilroy and a couple of these other guys, and I asked them if I could start dropping his name. Said absolutely. As soon as someone heard that I was friends with him, the floodgates were open. They're like, oh, you know Kilroy? I'm like, yeah, he lives a mile from my house. I go over to his house all the time, and, we screw around on these computers. And they're like, sure, you know him, you're a friend of ours. So then I started getting access all over the country on the top bulletin boards in the 80s. And once you got access to the file section, it was like I never went to a computer store again the rest of my life. I mean, everything was there for the taking, and it was beaten it was up there quicker than what the stores got it. And there was stuff that was only released overseas. And here it was, at my fingertips. The only problem was with the 300 baud modem, it took so long to download these damn games. So we had one phone in our house, and that was shared between my sister, my parents, and myself. And some of these games took like an hour and 20 minutes to download. So I'm tying up this phone day and night. I'm causing wars in my family. No one could get a hold of anybody. There wasn't such a thing as call waiting back then. And if there was, it would have knocked you off the modem anyway, so I would have disabled it. And it was the biggest complaint until I had enough money to buy my own phone line, probably about 4 or 5 years later when I got into high school. Nobody could get a hold of anybody in my house. It got to a point where people would sometimes ride their bikes over here to like get a hold of my parents or my sister. So it caused major pain in my household, but I got so addicted. Once you start getting these games around this pirate scene, you had to have it. It's like, oh, this is coming out, and you read about it in a magazine, like a game coming out or being released in the U.S. or Europe, you're like, gotta have it. So you'd be on the board, or word would travel quick. We would have these conferences too, these alliance conferences where we get all the pirates on a line. Of course, that was on a hacked alliance conference line from a company, and we would have like 30, 40 people on the phone at once, and we talk about all the new releases coming out and who's going to get it first, who's going to crack it. And then once we got it, I became known as a spreader. So I would take the game some of my friends would crack, like a couple of the guys, the Hayes brothers I was really friendly with, Kilroy, this guy, the Fox in Las Vegas, I was friends with him, Surfer Bob. I can name hundreds of people, Hawkeye, Billy Barno in Philly. There was just tons. I was talking to maybe 60, 70 people a week. And it was the underground, but it was cool. And I was a kid, and that's all I wanted to do. And I skipped going on vacation with my parents because I wouldn't be able to dial into these bulletin boards and see what was going on and leave messages to my friends. It just got like a drug. And my parents started saying, where are you getting all these games? Like, my room was just filled with stuff because I was taking all these games and selling them in my area. So I'd have these games that weren't even released yet, and I would download them, copy them to a floppy, or there was a really good utility that came out called Disfer, and now that we had the phone code, you could send a whole floppy disk to each other over this program called Disfer over the modem, and it compressed the hell out of it. So instead of downloading something for like an hour and some odd minutes, Disfer would send it in a third of that time or a quarter of the time. So then, after getting involved with all these people making some money, then I really started getting into like the higher speed modems. And that's when, you could start sneaking in a lot more phone calls and pulling down software, because now I went from a 300 baud modem all the way up to a 1200 baud modem, then a 2400 baud modem. I remember that thing cost $1,200. And that took me about 4 months of selling software back in the mid 80s to get $1,200. That's how much software I was selling. But it was a great time. It really was. I made so many friends, and it was exciting because we're on the underground, and anything that came out for the Atari, it wasn't, hey, are you going to be able to get this? It was, when are you going to be able to get this? And I was just this kid in a small town, and you'd walk into these stores, and no one really knew who you were. And I'm like giving phone codes to people all over the country. I had people calling me up saying, "Did you get any tonight?" And we kept revamping some of these hacking programs. And we just weren't on the bulletin boards. Then you start getting phone numbers of these guys, and you start talking to them. And then you would use this for the trade, and then you'd start going to these different conferences in different cities, it was just this whole underground world, and everybody just, there weren't any real enemies. And on the ST scene, there was battles. The pirates, half of them hated each other, and I was involved in a lot of those wars too. But the 8-bit scene, everybody liked each other. Everybody shared everything with each other. There was a lot of cool stories, a lot of good mentors, like the guys that were older than you that blazed the trail and taught you a lot. And some of those people I'm still friends with today. But it got to a point where the stuff got so addicting that a lot of my grades suffered in school, and I was even skipping school a lot just to stay home and hang out on these electronic bulletin boards and seeing, quote, famous crackers or pirates were leaving messages up on the message boards, and it's just hard to describe when you're a kid, and getting to know some of these real famous people, or was what I thought was famous. They were my generation of movie stars. These pirates and crackers and hackers. It was just a great time. I mean,
Awesome.
I could talk for hours about this scene. It took up 10 years of my life, like every day, night.
So did you ever get in trouble with your parents or the law or anything because of either the piracy directly or because of the grades and everything?
You know what? They really didn't go strong after pirates. They mainly tried to get a hold of crackers, but it was so hard to find people. I mean, it really was a secret society. It was like, the mob of the 60s and 70s. Like, no one talked. Everybody had a handle. Back in the day, you couldn't trace phone calls because the phone systems were all on crossbar. You would have to triangulate a phone call to find out who was making the call. It was a real tight secret society, even though it was a big secret society. So I never legally got in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of guys that got in trouble. Like, if you read a lot of books about hackers, well, these guys weren't software guys, but hackers in the 80s and 90s that made books. I knew a lot of those guys, but they got into the wrong things. I was mainly just all software. I was a software pirate and a spreader and a trader. And I got into the phone hacking. I remember I did get a letter in the probably 1986 or 87. I got a letter from MCI saying that if I kept having random calls into their network, that they're going to press charges. So that scared me a little bit. I just went on to another phone carrier then and hacked their phone cards. But with my parents, they threatened that when I was younger, threatened to take the computer away. They said it was eating up my life, and they said, we bought this to help you with school, and we know something's going on, and who are all these people that call our house with different accents? You're 12 years old, and you have people calling from all over the world. I had guys in England calling me, and it was like an empire we built. Bill Barno and Rick Duflop up in Canada, and Hawk. I mean, I can name guys on and on and on forever. And then you start seeing guys phase out, and then you're like, okay, what's going on? Like, the world's changing after 5-6 years, and then people start graduating to the ST, and then
were they phasing out because they were going to the ST, or because they were getting too old and discovering girls, or all those reasons? Going off to college? I mean, all those things?
But we couldn't tell them that we had a computer at home. I mean, I was a normal guy. I was playing hockey 4 or 5 days a week. And a lot of these guys played sports, and there was some, don't get me wrong, there was some pretty strange people on the computer scene, but then there was also a sector that we were just normal people. We all had girlfriends, and, we were computer bugs. There was something about that scene and being underground that nobody knew about except for the few hundred people in the country that were doing this. It was exciting. But yeah, legally, I got a couple things from phone companies, but never from software companies.
Okay, so you're humming along, you're pirating, you're trading, and then what was next? What changed for you? Did you move to the ST?
Yeah, so after a while, I wanted to keep my Atari 8-bit had switches and knobs and all kinds of stuff. My disk drive, my hard drive had all kinds of mods done to it. It was beautiful. I mean, it didn't look like anybody else's. Well, maybe a few other people, but I had all kinds of crazy LEDs and turbo boosters on it, and I forgot the name of everything. But I had all these toggle switches. But then, in order to get the ST, it cost so much more than the 8-bit, even though I was still selling software and stuff. I had to sell my 8-bit to get the ST. And I think I got the ST around, 1986. I think I was on the 8-bit only for like 5 years, four or 5 years. And then I had the thirst for the ST because a lot of my friends on the 8-bit were all buying STs and going ST and converting their bulletin boards over to ST. So I was like, gotta have it, So I had to find a way to. I was hustling a lot as a kid to get money and just to get this ST. But then the ST was bigger, and it no longer, where it was, everybody were tight knit friends, even though you belonged to different cracking groups. The ST opened up the world even bigger. That scene was much bigger with Europe and the US, and yeah, so a lot of the groups competed with each other, the cracking groups, which brought on what I'll call, and they got labeled the ST Wars back in the day. And I think there's even some information on the ST Wars on the internet right now. If you're really, really dig deep with some guys from Europe and a bunch of us in America, but it wasn't America versus the U.S. A lot of the Europeans were friends with a lot of us going against other Americans on the SD side. Just a lot of dirty play in the SD days. So that's where you really had to know who to trust and who to hang with, and that was a little different. I mean, we were still on the computers as much as we were before, and there's still tons of pirating going on, and but there was different levels of hacking started kicking up on the ST because of the capability of the machine and telecommunications and stuff like that. But that story's even longer. But the ST was definitely a fun time. Like I said today, I'm still pretty good friends with probably 8 or 9 guys that I talk to or email regularly from 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago. And it's just funny. We always bring up the old days. We call it the old days. And some of these guys still have their Atari 8-bits, and my one buddy still has his bulletin board that he fires up once in a while and just checks it out in the files that are on there and stuff.
Nice. So what was, I don't know much, I know less about the ST than the 8-bit stuff. So tell me a little bit about the ST wars. My sense is that, and I'm just spitballing here, but my sense is that with the ST's more space and graphics, that gave the ability to have intro screens, and those intro screens made the pirate groups want to show off their stuff, and then they had those scrolling text messages that could greet their friends and badmouth their enemies, and
yeah,
that probably led to what you're calling the pirate wars.
Yeah, a lot of that, and but there was a lot of dirty play on the ST side too. Um, some people were paying, where we're sending modems over to the Euros because a lot of games were getting released in Europe first. So some of the um, some of the people in the groups were sending, $1,000 modems that they were stealing over to Europe and saying, "Hey, I sent you a modem, so make sure I get all the games first." And then there was a lot of backstabbing and people lying to each other, and it was a mess. I mean, it was fun because I was a rambunctious teen, so I did a lot of the dirty work for a lot of my friends and some of the groups I
Like
belonged
what's
to.
dirty work? Like what?
um, disconnecting phone lines and stuff like that. Yeah,
Nice.
that's more on the hacking side, but we're able to, get into switching equipment for phone companies and disconnect people's phone lines and stuff like that, and listen in on calls and just stupid stuff like that. Because
Yeah.
I lived in a secure location. I was one of the we were still on old school crossbar phone system, so I got to get away with a lot of things without being traced. So we had a lot of fun on the hacking scene too with our enemies. And I mean the ST wars. I mean that's a whole nother phone call. I mean, but even on the Atari 8-bit, there were intro screens for the games, but they definitely weren't as involved. The music and the MIDI and the graphics is on the ST scene. Yeah, sometimes the intro was better than the game.
Yeah.
But still, it's like, oh, I gotta have this game, and you couldn't even play all the games on the 8-bit or ST that you had. You would load it up, make sure it worked, and said, yeah, I have this game. It was like a rite of passage saying, yeah, I have this game. Like, if you didn't have it, you were weak or whatever. So you had to make sure you had every game that came out. Yeah, they were definitely. Sometimes I say, Jesus, that ate up a lot of my life. What the hell was I thinking? But they were such fun times, and created a lot of opportunity to meet different people and get educated and even build a career out of some of the stuff that we did back in the day. But you just had to live through it. It's hard to explain. It was almost like being in the mob. It was pretty neat. You would tell people in your friends in the hockey locker room, not too loud, but you would tell them about this scene. They just look at you cross-eyed, like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, there's this big secret society for computer games. As strange as that sounds, but it was big, it was strong, it was powerful, and it was just a fun time. But like I said, if you stuck to pirating games and the phone codes, that was okay. But some of my friends really got into trouble because you kept having this thirst for more, for more. Okay, I'm pirating all these years. Okay, I know how to hack a phone code. Now I want to start breaking into things, and you just had to really know how to control yourself because you got so scholarly on this computer platform and you started understanding how phone systems work and how computer systems work, that you could really get yourself in a lot of trouble, which a lot of guys I knew did. And they went to jail and everything else, and a lot of them are in books and whatever else. But it was, but you were never afraid. You never thought you were going to get caught. You were like invincible because the previous 8 years you could do whatever the hell you wanted. It's like a license to steal being on these Atari systems. It was crazy.
So how did it come to an end for you?
Finally, I think I was going to college. I was like, enough is enough. And just so I wasn't tempted, I sold all my stuff. I got an IBM laptop, which one of my buddies sent to me. it was probably a $6,000-7,000 laptop because he got involved in some stuff, and I just shut it down. I was like, time to get on with life, and then I just totally got out of it, and it changed. Once it started hitting the late '80s, early '90s, it started having a new crop of young guys, and you didn't know anybody anymore, and people were starting to just get out of it, and I was like, okay, all the guys that I trust and hung with either are in trouble or they gave it up, and we all started, some guys started getting married and stuff like that. So I just went cold turkey and said, just so I'm not tempted, I sold everything I had. I just got rid of it.
If you could, yeah, go ahead.
But there's years and years and years and hours and hours and hours of memories and stories that is quite fascinating. And I probably wouldn't have given it up. If I had to do it all over again, it was definitely a fun time, and living on it was exciting for being a young kid and what was going on and what you saw and people you met, and just being part of the underground. It was pretty neat.
I've got a little more time, so tell me the story, like the one that makes you laugh the hardest, or that makes you just like the one that epitomizes the pirate scene.
Oh man, probably the most fun we had was when we started hacking these teleconference codes, and we would have a phone company engineer's test set that had the two clips on the phone, and one of us would volunteer and take the test set and go clip onto, like, behind 7-Eleven, clip onto their phone systems, and then use the conference code that we hacked, like an Alliance teleconference code or an AT&T conference code. And then we would get like 10 or 15 of our friends, all crackers and pirates, on this conference bridge that companies would use. We would hack them. And then we would do all kinds of things, like call different party lines. That's when party lines were out. And we would have people on from all over the world. And, we would just goof on people. And there were so many instances, but that was the most fun, because that really had nothing to do with computers or software. That was just a bunch of people that, we were kids, but we all got along well, and we all had the same sense of humor, and we would just do these, like, as immature as it sounds, we were 13 years old, we would just prank people with like 20 of us on the line. It was pretty funny.
Awesome.
And we would sit on those conference bridges for hours upon hours all night. I can't even imagine what some of these companies, what their bill was when they got the bill in the mail. It had to have been thousands of dollars. But we didn't think anything of it. We're like, hey, we're using a phone system. We can't afford to make these calls, so we're going to find a way to make the calls because we need to communicate. It's kind of like telling a kid nowadays they can't have the internet. They will find a way to get on the internet, Yeah. That was the same type of thirst we had, but it wasn't as commercialized, obviously. They're just, I would have to think, but there was just so many fun times on that Atari scene. It was out of hand.
Right. So there are still many people who use Atari computers for games and hacking and whatnot, and some of them listen to this podcast. So if you could send a message to the Atari community that still exists today, and you can right now, what would you tell them?
Oh man, there's people that still use them.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, if they're my age, I might know them. I want to send a shout out, but if not, I'm glad that the beast hasn't died, that the Atari is still kicking, because honestly, some of these days I wish I wish I still had both of my. Well, I had 3 different Ataris. I wish I had them all, just because there are so many memories and so many. I'd like to just load up some of the games and read some of the greetings and the crack screens and stuff like that. But yeah, I would tell those guys to hang on to their equipment and keep going, because once you get rid of it, you start to miss it.
Yeah, you should download an emulator for your modern computer, and you can run Atari software on that.
Do they have all the crack games, or is it all the commercial stuff?
It's both. It's whatever. It's once you download it, there's all sorts of software out there. It's all been cracked by now because it's online. That's why it's been cracked. So,
do you know what? The only thing that the pirate scene ruined was I really appreciated playing games when I had to pay for them. Like, I would sit there and pay and play some of these shitty games like forever, just because I paid for it, and I only had 5 games.
Yeah, you were invested in it, and you were gonna play that game to death, because what else were you gonna play anyway?
And you enjoyed it, but once you start pirating, now you have hundreds and thousands of games, and you're like, what do I play next? Oh, let me load this up. Oh, this is kind of cool. And you don't even get into it. Maybe a few games, that you really like Mule and Miner 2049er and some of the old school games like that. But a lot of them you just load up, make sure it worked. It kind of really ruined game playing for me. And ever since I got an Atari ST, I don't think I ever really played a game that much. I just had to have it. And even to this day, I don't play video games. I think being a pirate ruined that for me. Because I used to play them for hours. I used to type them in and play them for hours, and they sucked. It was my entertainment. That was the only thing I had. But, besides playing sports and hanging out with my friends, I mean, this was something that if I was in the house, I'm like, oh, cool. Like, I couldn't afford, like, parents couldn't afford a Atari 2600, so I had this computer, and I'm typing in these games, and I thought it was just as good. But, that really, piracy really ruined game playing for me, because I think once I got into it real heavily, I played some of the sports games and stuff like that, and like I said, maybe a handful of games on the 8-bit and ST, but it really ruined enjoying video games for me. The pirate scene did.
Wow. And
then we had Glenn cracking 5200 games, and then no one's buying those cartridges anymore. I mean, we're Neo Geo, we were cracking those games in the early 90s. I mean, everything was there for the taking. No one was buying anything. It was just, but along with that, I wasn't playing anything. So it just got to be this addiction where I had to have something that I was selling it to people, And
right. The game wasn't the game anymore. It was getting the game, trading the game.
Yeah, it was
a meta game.
And they'd say, how is this game? I'd be like, oh my God, I play this thing for hours. It's incredible. I'd be lying to everybody just so they buy it from me, because tons of people in my town and my school, no one had the connections, and they'd be like, I can't believe you have all this stuff. So yeah, I was hustling games like crazy.
Do you have any connection, or do you still know? Do you know who it was? I'm interested in. I want to talk to LJ Silver, the name behind the pirate DOSes.
Oh no, I don't know him. No, not at all.
All right.
No, he was on a couple of conferences I was on when I was younger, but this is when I was too young to really know who he was. We even had back in the day. We even had Michael Dell on a couple of our conferences when he was in college, and
nice.
a couple famous guys like that. It was pretty funny. Kevin Mitnick,
Amazing.
Yeah. You won't believe the type of people who were on the scene.
The CEO of Salesforce.com, he's like a kabillionaire. He programmed games for Crystalware. He was an Atari guy.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
I forgot who it was, but back in the early 80s, we had a couple movie stars were on the scene too, and they went by a fake name, but someone uncovered them, and we had them on a couple of our conferences too. It's like some B-rated actors. I didn't know who the hell they were, but yeah, there was people like tons of people you wouldn't even think were on that scene.
thank you, Bob.
Yep, have a good one.
You too. If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute something, I encourage you instead to donate to one of our favorite organizations, the Internet Archive, at archive.org. The Internet Archive is a nonprofit digital library with the stated mission of universal access to all knowledge. They've done incredible things to preserve computer history, including hosting thousands of programs in an in-browser Atari emulator, creating the Wayback Machine, and offering full-page scans of countless Atari computer books and magazines. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate.